So, let's talk about the situation between the US and Iran. Right now, what we're hearing from officials and what's actually happening on the ground, well, they seem to be two totally different stories. We're going to try and make sense of these contradictions and figure out what's really going on.
And then, bam, we get this bombshell statement from President Trump. He says the conflict is very close to over. I mean, on the surface, that sounds amazing, right? Like there's finally a light at the end of the tunnel.
But is it really? That's the million-dollar question. Does what's happening on the ground actually line up with those hopeful words? Okay, let's dive in and see.
So, to really get a handle on that quote, you've got to understand the context here. This isn't just some small spat. Nope, this has been building and escalating for a while now. Yeah, we're talking about day 47 of this whole thing. Think about that for a second. That's more than 6 weeks of nonstop tension, military posturing, and the whole world kind of holding its breath. So, definitely not a minor issue. Okay, but to be fair, that optimism isn't just pulled out of thin air. There is this glimmer of hope, a potential off-ramp. Word on the street is that a second round of high-level talks with Tehran could be starting up in Pakistan. And if that happens, it would be a huge deal. And this is where things get tricky, because while they're talking about talking, you've got to look at what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz. This is where those hopeful diplomatic words are running smack into a very harsh military reality. And here it is, laid out plain as day. On one side, you have the promise of negotiations. But on the other, a full-blown U.S. naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. And let me tell you, that's one of the most important shipping lanes for oil in the entire world. It's pretty hard to talk peace when you're also squeezing that hard. And you know, even if they manage to get everyone in the same room, there are some massive roadblocks. We're not talking about minor details here. These are the big ones. Huge disagreements over things like uranium enrichment timelines and the fundamental rules of who can sail where. These are the kinds of issues that can blow up the whole negotiation. But in the middle of all this political and military drama, there was one small but really important piece of good news. The Red Cross actually managed to get the first shipment of medical aid into Tehran. It's a small thing, but for the people on the ground, it's a huge relief. So, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, but why does this matter to me? Well, the answer is the economy. The economic fallout from this could be massive, and we're not just talking about the region. This has the power to send shockwaves across the entire globe. And don't just take my word for it. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, they've put out a pretty scary warning. They're saying that if this gets any worse, it could actually trigger a global recession. Yeah, the stakes are incredibly high. And look, we're already seeing the economic damage. The IMF just took its growth forecast for the Middle East and North Africa and basically slashed it. They were expecting almost 4% growth, now it's down to just over 1%. That is a colossal drop, and it's going to hit millions of people hard. And if you thought that was complicated, buckle up, because there's another huge problem. The US and its traditional allies, they're not all on the same page. You'd think they'd have a united front, but nope. Everyone's got their own agenda, and it's making a coordinated response almost impossible. Take Italy, for instance. The US is publicly calling them out because Prime Minister Meloni refuses to get involved in any military strikes. Meanwhile, you've got Israel, which is focused on its own security and pushing for a permanent military presence in southern Lebanon. See what I mean? It's not one clear strategy. It's a mess. It's like this incredibly complex game of chess with a dozen different players. You've got Israeli troops surrounding a key town. At the same time, the US is threatening to block Chinese ships carrying Iranian oil. And then, out of nowhere, you have a rare US-led diplomatic meeting between Lebanon and Israel in Washington. It's aggression and diplomacy all happening at once. A real mixed bag. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, what you've really got are two very different, very powerful strategies, and they are heading right for each other. It really boils down to two paths, two choices. Path number one is the pressure campaign. That's the US Treasury trying to absolutely crush Iran's economy by stopping their oil sales. Path number two is the diplomatic gamble. That's the hope pinned on those fragile talks in Pakistan, a potential way out of this mess, but a risky one. So yeah, that's the core of it right there. You have this strategy of maximum pressure crashing head-on into this very delicate chance for peace. And those two things, they just don't mix. And that leaves us with the big final question. Will these proposed talks actually lead to a breakthrough? Or is all this pressure just going to cause a total breakdown? Right now, it could honestly go either way.